Thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So this morning, I am delighted to welcome Paul Balsom. So welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be here.
Thank you for coming on. It seems months ago when we lined this up, but finally come round. Really excited to get you on. There's plenty to chat about. So anyone that doesn't know who you are, Paul, would you mind just giving us a brief background on what you've done before, education, and more importantly, what you're doing now?
Yeah, I'm being very privileged to be working in, or either studying or working in football and sports science for the last 40 years, believe it or not. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to realize how old am I. I always used to think of myself, I still do think of myself as two 25-year-olds as opposed to a 50 plus, but believe it or not, it's been 40 years since I studied sports science in Cardiff, at Cardiff Met, and then since then studied in America, but ended up in Stockholm in 1989, where I took my PhD in exercise physiology. And then during the 90s and from then on working with the Swedish national team as a sports scientist, physiologist, performance analyst, in the beginning a little bit of everything. And then during the time being based in Sweden, in Stockholm, doing some commuting back to the UK where I grew up, working with initially Bolton Wanderers 2002, 2004, Southampton, Leicester, Hull, and then back at Leicester. So and now actually finishing off in coach education. So sort of a long story short, I had very limited experience as a player, simply not good enough. Realised that at an early enough age to jump ship. But then fortunate to have studied sports science, been at the coal face, which we're still on now, but also now moved into coach education with UEFA, which is really rewarding.
Were you at Bolton in the heyday, the Allardyce time, or before?
Yeah. 2002, so Premier League. Yeah, 2 great years there. Really fond memories. I mean, it's amazing to think back then, that long ago. What we actually did at that time, thanks to Sam, but also some of the staff that I was working with now who have gone on to make big names for themselves, working at Liverpool City, and so really good times, and great players.
Absolutely.
The Okochas, the Yorkiers, the Jeskalainens, Campo. Wow, great times, good times.
When you think back, unbelievable names like World Cup winners. Champions League winners,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And Big Sam, he had them dancing at his fingertips. It was amazing. Really good times.
Yeah, I did a survey recently, and one of the questions was a simple one, and it was age and experience in the sport. And when looking, and this is in football and rugby, but particularly in football, the majority of people who were surveyed and who answered the survey were under 10 years in terms of experience, and majority of the time under 35. So you've mentioned 40 years in doing what you're doing. So what's been the key for you, do you think, that's enabled you to stick around?
I love my job. I mean, I absolutely love my job. I mean, there's not a day where I don't sort of jump out of bed. I apologize for the cliches, but it really is. I grew up with grew up in England, loving the sport. Taken to games at 4 by my father and his father, and from day one, football was my life. And there was a little crossroads where I could have studied engineering and decided to stay into football, but it is a passion, and you know what, the energy I get back from working with the players, and staff, and they're traveling the world and experience. I mean, I've traveled the whole world through football, and it's just, I feel today I could go another 40 years without. I mean, just sometimes you have to realize how old you are when you get these 20, 30-year-olds, the players, and you say, okay, calm down. I can't do that anymore. So, just so many great people working in the game, and just the passion and love for the game. That's just, and been very fortunate to get some opportunities to do what I do.
Nice. So one thing that's come up in the podcast quite a bit is this integration between the technical and tactical and the fitness side, and how that's, especially with the guys that have been around a little bit longer, of how that's developed. And you mentioned the role at UEFA and the coach education. I'd be really interested to get to know your views on that and what UEFA are doing to amalgamate them two areas of the team, if that's all right.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned initially, I mean, in the Swedish FA, I actually started in the early '90s with the women's team, and then went into the men's team. But then it was a dual role as a performance analyst and a fitness coach, because the resources in such a small country weren't there. So I actually spent 20 years working as a performance analyst. So believe it or not, warm up in the stands, filming the game, back down at half time. Taking the warm up back up with running up the stairs with my boots on, and so I really, and I got my pro license, UEFA pro license. So I'm not just saying that because it's a education, but so I really do have a good understanding of the tactical side of the game, and I do, and that's one of the things we're trying to install in UEFA. I mean, in fact, two things. One is that the fitness coaches, they do need to understand football, but also we're working the first priority now is to speed track the understanding of the football coaches are working with support practitioners, and that's really from grassroots all the way through to pro. So it's that, if I've got one assistant coach, or if I'm working with a team of coaches, what do I need to know as a manager? What's important for me? I know the tactical, I know the technical, but what do I need to know about the fitness side, so I can work with these people and understand these people? And as I said, the other way around for the fitness coaches. But as we pointed out, if I'm a fitness coach, I can't be expected to have an A license, a UEFA A license coaching, because that takes time. If I've got to get a degree, I mean, I'm going to be 10 years just in education before I can put my foot onto the grass. So it's a really interesting journey we're starting on with UEFA. But the priority now is to upskill the football coaches to understand the fitness side of things, because you're so right. I mean, if you look at stats, I mean, we may get on to talk about, but physical stats in a game, highly affected by tactics and the type of game we're playing. I can just mention in the World Cup now, where Sweden had a very World Cup. I mean, our very high speed or sprint running stats, distance cover greater than 7 meters per second, were the lowest of all the 32 teams. I mean, and they weren't just 31 and 32. It was like 31. Oh, Sweden 32. But we could explain that because tactically we were very compact, and it wasn't a problem. So it really is important, that integrated approach, as we call it now, to really understand how it all fits together.
Is there any reluctance from either side, from the technical and the tactical side, to integrate the fitness, or and more specifically the fitness, to get to know more about the technical and the tactical?
100%. 100%. I mean, hey, we could talk all day about this, but one thing we so in the UEFA role, we've actually talked to all 55 national associations now, and we've listened to them. This is really, with the Football Advisory Group, Fitness for Football Advisory Group, want to listen to the national associations. And what's very clear is any practitioner working in a team, any fitness or sports science practitioner, has to respect the culture and philosophy of the head coach. You of course you're there supporting the players, but you're also supporting the head coach. So I can't go in with we're going to do this and we're going to do this, and science says this is no. I mean, okay, we need to work very closely with the head coach, and that's really important. But of course, then we're in a time now where if we're able then to educate the head coach, so now with better education from grassroots all the way through to B license, A license, and pro license, then we're going to start coming closer together. But I see some horrible things, and I guess at the end of the day, it's so much about the people. It's you can have all the knowledge, but it's the person and also that chemistry. I know I'm talking a lot now, but it's not uncommon. You've got also different models, and if we just focus back at the league, a manager who comes into a club and brings a whole entourage. I mean, it's not unusual for managers to bring, maybe changes slightly now, but 6 or 7 people with him: a head of performance, an assistant coach, and maybe a goalkeeper coach. That's one model. The other model is, the head coach comes in and works with the people who are already there, and there are strengths and advantages, disadvantages of the different models. if I come in with 6 people I can trust, I know I can go to war with them. I don't have to look behind my back. I know that we're going together. If I come in as a new, I have to get to learn the people. Can I trust them? So it's really different, and it's really interesting that you see different models and how it works, especially at the elite level.
From a sports scientist, SSC coach, fitness coach, whatever we want to call ourselves, and we'll probably come on to that as well in a little bit. Would you have any tips to help either them two options along from the inside, and how you've potentially done it when you've seen both of them examples play out, the entourage versus the what may from the outside seem a more long-term aim of the integration of current club staff?
We have a very strong leader in the Swedish national team, and he has some pillars that are non-negotiable. So you can't have any prestige. You have to be there without prestige. You have to be proactive. You have to communicate. So there are certain things for me that are non-negotiable, and you have to be yourself. And sometimes relationships work, sometimes they don't work. And then I always think an X factor. I think advice to anyone that, or certainly from the fitness side, working, going in and working with managers, you have to have a little X factor, and whatever that might be. It might be a little bit of knowledge, it might be a personality, and then I guess what's really important is especially in sort of the fitness, as you say, whatever we call ourselves, it's that you've got a loyalty to the club, because at the end of the day they're paying your salary. You have a loyalty to the manager because you're working for him or her. But then you have this your relationship with the players, and it's really, it can be difficult to balance. In an ideal scenario, your relationship with all three is great, but it's really trying to balance that, because yourself, Rob, as working, and people listening who are working as a fitness coach, that your relationship with your players is key. And then suddenly a manager may say, okay, we're in tomorrow, or we're off tomorrow, or double session, and it's that ability to deal with that sort of that curveball, and you have to keep your face. Any fitness coach who doesn't get moaned at by his players, has never been a fitness coach. So that, not again, we're not going to do this. So it's really dealing with, and I guess this has grown also over the years. So it's not just good enough to sort of come out of university, you've got a 3-year Bachelor of Science degree or a sports science degree. It's also your ability to be a leader and to communicate.
Is that something that, going back to the UEFA part of your job, is that something that's going to be integrated in that side? Understanding all this, what you just talked about?
So at the moment we're focusing educating the football coaches.
Sorry, yeah.
So the 2 steps. So one is educating a football coach. So actually the further they go from grassroots to pro, the more that they will have to learn to work with specialists. The next stage will then be to bring in a UEFA fitness diploma. That's on the sort of roadmap. And then it will be, I'm sure it will be. It's not just about aerobic, anaerobic, muscle fibers, energy systems. It'll also be about that ability to adopt an interdisciplinary approach in a multidisciplinary team. It's that ability for everyone to work together. So to have a clear understanding of their role, I think, is also very, very important. Coming back to your last question as well, is that what is my role? Can I step out of my role? Do I just focus on my role if I see something else? So it's Premier League today, you're looking at teams of anywhere between 5 and 10 in the sports science department, with nutritionists and psychologists and everything. So it's a lot's happened in the last probably last 10 to 20 years.
Mm-hmm. This may be looking a little bit too far in advance based on the 2 phase that you've talked about with UEFA. But how do you see the second phase being integrated, and maybe would it change the day-to-day workings of a sports scientist and the conditioning coach? How would that be integrated? Would there be any stipulations that, and this is me preempting something that maybe never going to happen, but someone would have to go, if you in a UEFA country, you have to go through a UEFA qualification to be able to be a fitness coach? Is that something that you could see coming down? Okay.
So if you look at the 55 nations now, 13 of them already have their own national fitness diploma. And of those 13, then there is a range of which some insist that to work at the top level, you have to have so if I'm in Switzerland, for example, I have to have the equivalent of the Swiss accreditation to work as a fitness coach in football. And this is a really interesting one. And our job in UEFA is going to be that if I have a UEFA fitness accreditation, if I take that accreditation in Sweden and I want to work in Moldova, when I come to Moldova and I can say I am a UEFA A licensed qualified fitness coach, they will know, they'll have an understanding of the level that I work at. Now, if Moldova then want to say everyone working in our Premier League has to have this qualification, that's going to be on an individual basis. UEFA won't stipulate that England, for example, and then we may come on to it, but fitness coach, strength and conditioning coach, performance director, fitness guru, strength and fitness coach, movement coach. You go on LinkedIn.
You've got another 40 minutes, 20, Paul. Keep going with them job titles. We could keep going.
In LinkedIn, you'll get, you'll pick up 20 titles within, my first 100 contacts, I'll have 20 different titles. So, so do you say you have to have does a fitness coach have to, or does one member of the team? Just to bring this part of the discussion to an end, I think I would like to see maybe a head of performance qualification. So if you're calling yourself a head of performance, then maybe I would really like to think about UEFA. So you have a UEFA Pro licensed football coach qualification. So maybe we could introduce a pro license head of performance type of qualification. So that's definitely a quality control. So if I'm going to run, if I'm going to manage a team of performance specialists, but also I think it will give a person in that position an incentive. They've probably already got their degree. They're never going to take a UEFA Pro license coach because they don't have time. So it would be something for them to work towards. And then you could go into leadership, business budgets and everything. And probably the actual theoretical fitness, sports science side of it would be, only one part of many different parts.
Mm-hmm. Just interestingly enough, one of the pillars that you mentioned from the Swedish national coach, the first one you mentioned was prestige. What do you mean by, what does he mean by not having prestige?
Is that it's not about you.
Okay.
It's as soon as it becomes about you, then you're out the team, or you will never get in the team if it's about you.
Yeah.
And this is also very, very, it's not about you. You're only there to support the players. And I say that, that's one of the things, if I'm talking to, I did a talk on, in fact, Sweden now are bringing their own national fitness coach diploma in, and I just did a very small introduction, and that was one of the things we talked about. You're there to support the players. Your job is to support the players and to improve performance.
Done. How would that fit into the kind of 2021 where we've got social media, we've got people pushing their own personal brand, you've got websites, you've got podcasts, you've got people coming on podcasts and talking about what they do. How does that fit in with that, and how would it be viewed?
What are you trying to say, people coming on podcasts?
I'm talking about me, not anyone else.
Yeah, really good, really interesting. And again, and we actually, I took it up in the UEFA that we're social media. Yeah, I keep coming back to 50 plus, but I do try to. But hey, I've got to look at Instagram, I've got to look at Twitter, I've got to look on LinkedIn, and there's so many. There's a lot of good stuff, of course. There's a lot of poor stuff. At the end of the day, someone who's pushing themselves. No, not for me. It's there's, I don't have time to do all this kind of stuff. I'm busy doing what I need to be doing, and there is a group of practitioners that sort of, that we came through the 90s, and you're probably aware of them. That I guess Tony Strutter with Barry Druss. There's a lot of people we're kind of that other side of it, and the best practitioners I know, there are some really good ones that they don't spend a lot of time on social media. Not saying right or wrong, but it is also a problem. I mean, my manager may come into me and say, "Hey, I've just read that if I eat this, or if I do this, or if I buy this, we're going to be 5% better." Look, they're told that it's.
How do you deal with that, Paul? How do you deal with that influence? Not only managers, but clearly like players are young adults being influenced by not only on social media but potentially people around them. That's chaos potentially.
Absolutely, education. That's that is one thing, and something that I'm a big believer in is player empowerment. So actually, it's not gym at 9 o'clock today. Be there. It's okay. You need to do a gym session today. This is what we need to do. Okay, if obviously resource depending, we can't do that everywhere. But if you want to do it before training, should we do it between sessions? Should we do it? Do you want to come in early? Do it on your own. So getting the player to understand, and I think we've got better. I think the level of the education of players has improved, and that's probably a resource thing that we are able to spend. There's more of us spending more time with players. We mentioned Håkan Andersson before in sort of the pre-chat here, and Håkan's a sprint coach, and I observed one of his sessions, and his athlete, I think he ran 10 times 40 meters. And that was the whole session, but their contact time was 55 minutes. So they were speaking to each other on one-on-one for 55 minutes. And do we get to speak to our players for 55 minutes in a season? Probably not. But if there's 10 of us, we can do that. And time's going quickly, but in terms of data, this is where data can have a really important role in technology, because whereas before, a player will come in and say, "Oh, that was a hard session." I said, "Yeah, it wasn't really. Yeah, okay. Let's look at the heart rate. Let's look at some metrics, and let's discuss it." And so now I've got a starting point. I can use data as a starting point for a discussion. And most players today, to be fair to them, they're inquisitive, because at the end of the day they want to get better as well, and the price of being out of the team is it's huge. So they want to, and you'll find most players, the majority of players today are really, really keen to learn more, to understand what they can do to be better.
Has the empowerment of players changed over the time that you've been involved? Are players expecting to be empowered a lot more now? And if so, is there any other examples that you could potentially give where you do give them that freedom of choice in things?
I'm a big believer in freedom of choice. For example, with the Swedish for the warm-up, that period where you see the fitness coach, doing his 10 meters, and they all copy him, and then he goes back and they copy him. I don't do that. So for 3 minutes, they work in twos, they do 12-meter shuttles, but they do what they want to do. So even they don't have to do what the other one does. That's their time to get ready for the next phase of the warm-up, so that they're completely empowered. If I'm working with an international player and he doesn't know what he needs to do, I don't need to take 2 steps to the left and he follows me 2 steps to the left. I believe that they should do it. It's slightly different in the national team because they're coming from different backgrounds. So I'm not, would I do that in the club side? I'm not sure, but it is an example where I'm working with well-educated, top players. I give them a framework, and I let them, to some extent, fill in the blanks. For example, we don't jog, so in the warm-up, once we do an initial jog, so that they can, football players are childish, so get that out of your system. Okay, now we go, and from then on, it's focused. So it's not okay. Go on 3 minutes, do what you want to do, but I give them the ability to do what they need to do. The same with pre-activation. Again, in the national side, they have a window where they can. I create the window where they have a 20 to 30 minutes of pre-activation, but we're not in there telling them exactly what they can do.
Is that a cultural thing, Paul, from Scandinavia as well?
Yeah, I want to come back to it, and that's a really good point, Rob, because we even in my club size, there were, with certain groups of players at certain times, things like that would never have worked, and they needed leadership, and leadership was the right thing, and they did need someone to follow. So, and even today, there may be groups of players in depending on the culture, and some head coaches won't buy into that. Some head coaches that I know today want them all doing the same thing in rhythm. It looks good. We're a team, and absolutely fine. That's completely fine. So it's a really good point that it has to be at the right time with the right group of players. So,
if people haven't got that group, or have partially a group that would like to have that freedom of choice, that empowerment, how would someone balance that? And maybe if you had the power to be able to shift from a head coach, for example, how would you do that and shift over to that model that you've described?
No, I think it's for any fitness coach working, and again you'll know yourself, it's it's getting the support, or the förtroende, I can't find the word, the confidence of the senior players. So if you get a buy-in from them, then you're looking to pull the others across, and I guess that's key. I mean, obviously, if the senior players aren't with you, then that's a problem. It's probably best just to do it another way. But again, there's a lot of the senior players often easier to work with. They have a lot of experience in the game. They wanna keep going. 31, 32, 33, 34. So it's quite with education, and it's you're doing it for their good. It's the opposite to do what I do so I can look good when the TV cameras are on me during the warm-up. You say, well, this isn't about me. This is about you. And I'll have discussions with my players. And as recently in the World Cup, we changed the warm-up. They said, Paul, it's too long. We can cut this. Okay, let's talk about where can we go. The players, yeah, the players. And okay, what can we do? Okay, so we ended up going out, and it doesn't sound a lot, but 2 or 3 minutes later than we normally did, and we cut certain parts of the warm-up, and absolutely fine. It was a great conversation. I said, I'm here for you guys. If I can tick my boxes of what we need to do to prepare for the game, and you feel ready, yes. So.
Again, from someone that's worked across different countries, again, is that a cultural thing that they will say, they'll not call you out, but they'll mention it and say, well, this needs to happen. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. But I guess that's also the way I work. So I do open. I don't work with a closed door. This is the way we do it. This is the only way we do it. I mean, of course, I've got my manager watching me. He needs to make sure it looks right. But if I'm working with experienced players, then I can work with them. But you keep coming back to culture, and I can't emphasize you're so right. I mean, and some players want to be led. Some players, that togetherness in the team, all doing the same thing. At the end of the day, we do the same warm up. We're doing pretty much. Maybe mine gives a little bit more freedom for the players to do what they need to do. But at the end of the day, you've warmed up. Off we go for the game. So it's not really a big thing, but it's quite an interesting one. And again, that's quite experience. It's been very privileged to work in different countries and travel different countries. But now, as I've got older, I do try. There isn't just one way. If I'm, for example, lecturing or having a workshop, it's you need to make it work for the culture that you're working in, to match the philosophy of your head coach, and then with the players you're working with.
You've mentioned a couple of times, and we spoke about it before, that the integration of technology and how many options we've got. And I'd just like to get your input on the process that you'd go through across the jobs that you've got, the consultancies that you do, how you prioritize the tech that you actually invest in, not only monetarily but time-wise. And just that process, I think, is really interesting, because young coaches are bombarded. You should be doing this. Then you've got blogs on this, podcasts on this. You've got all this information, and especially tech being a big thing. And just maybe some advice for people to filter out and actually get to what they want and need.
I think in terms of the one thing that most levels now, if you're employed as a let's call it a fitness coach, I think the player tracking, the wearable player tracking is something that, again, I would almost call it non-negotiable. And there really isn't an excuse to say we can't afford it, because the entry level player tracking, wearable player technology is less than a pair of football boots today, and there are startups, as we speak, that it's going to be affordable by all. But they also came out with the National Association, not just having the technology, it's then having the resources then to manage that data. So, if you think if you're collecting data at 25 hertz with 25 players for a 90-minute training session, you're up to 500,000 points per player. That data then has to be stored, it has to be analyzed, and then that feedback has to go back to the coach, and then you have to look to make find an insight and make an intervention. So it's not just about the monetary, it's about that strategy and what you're going to use it for. And if I'm collecting all this data and the head coach is going, no, that's not for me, we're going to do it this way, that's also, so I think that, wearable player tracking, that's here to stay, with the heart rates, the internal, that's harder to translate that data. Sometimes I do think we go too much away from the actual physiology and what is heart rate actually telling me, and I think at the top level, yes, but it's still quite, we are an intermittent sport where, heart rate again was, it's great for aerobic sports or endurance sports, but we need to be a little bit careful how we're translating our heart rate data in football. But then you've got the Nord board, you've got the force frame or whatever it's called. You've got, we've got all sorts of people knocking on our doors on a regular basis. I think it's the bigger picture, and I get guilt of it. I want this and I want that, and we've just invested in some technology to measure speed, but it's that whole process, that the whole workflows. Where are we going to use it? When are we going to use it? Who's going to be analyzing the data? How's the data going to be stored? How is that data going to be able to interact with other data? And it's that whole cycle. And that would be my recommendations if you are going to invest in technologies, is to see the whole workflow cycle.
Just going back to what you said at the start about someone having an X factor, coming into an organisation with an X factor. Is this a place where someone can really own? Is this a place that someone can really own if you've got that X factor when it comes to data? We're seeing, again, not to harp on about social media, but it's all about programming languages, whether it be R or dealing with all this data. I'm just interested to see if that could be a potential avenue for people to go down, not to replace what the kind of fitness coach qualities, but in addition to, and really add value to an organisation.
Yeah, really, really interesting question. You could you could be going all night on this one. Absolutely, and you know what? I would go as far to say today, if you go back 10 years, you'll have fitness coaches who could barely turn on a computer, and that's not being negative, but that was the fact. Today you can't work in a top club without being able to log your data and do some basic, if it's an Excel spreadsheet or putting data into a club bespoke database. And so you've got that spectrum then, and all the way through to these people who can program it. I'll sit down and I can wake up in the middle of the night. I wonder if that one will go with that one. And I'm just getting into Power BI, and then we also work with different sort of database companies, and I may just do something, and look at that, there's an outlier at that point, or I may then pick up the phone and say. So I think that's coming back to the how you put a backroom team together, and I think in any sports science department at the elite level there will be people with more advanced analytical and knowledge, and all the way through to an analytics department where I can go to the next room and give a guy, say, look, this is what I want to look at. It drives me crazy. I get too impatient, Rob. Calm down, Paul. We'll take a look. But it's trying. I guess the key is trying to answer football questions. This is something I've learned a lot. It's not just analyzing data for the sake of it. What football question can I answer with this data? So it's also put some form of onus on these analytic people to understand football as well. and also that balance again, coming back to it's this football DNA. We have to have a basic understanding of football. Those of us working at the coalface probably more than those of us working sort of behind our desk looking at data, but there needs to be a common understanding of football. But yeah, most clubs today have, in fact every club I'm working at have sort of analytic geniuses that just blow me away. I mean, I can sit down for like 5 hours, I did it, and then 10 minutes he's got, I get something on my desk which is sort of and with just a basic like Power BI, and all Power BI as the readers will know, it's just a way of a graphic interface for all your data just to show you. But can I go into my coach or one of my fellow practitioners with a graph that rather than a table of data, it's just so powerful. And players as well.
Just to maybe contradict that or add another level to it, is there certain times where people and fitness try to put the fitness coaches together, like S&C Sports Science, not the analytical teams that are built they're dedicated for this, but is there a worry that the sports scientist, the S&C coach, will go too far that way, too far, to be too data driven, if that's can use that, and forget all the 35 minutes that we've talked about being an actual fitness coach and a sports scientist, and forget those relationships, forget the culture, forget the core of what we do, because we've gone so far that way.
Spot on. Really, 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 really good point. And there's no answer to that, but I can't agree with you more. And I feel sorry for these, as I say, a fitness coach. You've done your warm up, and I see some great people. Their ability to deal with the players, but then when they come in, they have to log. You can't just say to gone are the day where you write analog, this is what we did, and you give it to your assistant and say, that doesn't happen these days. But I guess what I will say is, the education and the same with coaches. You think about 10 years ago, we all had mobile telephones, but the digital world we're living in is not just when we walk into the football ground, it's in our whole life. So we're being influenced by and our kids as well, growing up with technology. So I guess it will become easier, this I generation of players and coaches, it will be easier for them. But it's a really good point, and I can find myself being guilty of it sometimes, spending an example, at an iPad that had crashed, and it took me 4 hours to get the iPad up and working, but I wasn't gonna, but should I be trying to get the iPad up and working? No, I shouldn't really be doing that. I should have been focused on other things. So I do fall guilty of that. But it's a huge learning process, because, and that's maybe not a good example, but if you do, look at your data and start looking for an outlier or something, the next time you do it, you just bring up that template and that whole journey is, again, you go back not that long ago, the ability to store data, the ability to use Power BI and all these type of graphic interfaces, it's just grown and for very little, if any, cost. So it's but no, we do have to maintain that focus of working with the players. But I guess it comes back to your role, and maybe that is a key. What is my role? I'm privileged now that I can have that little bit of sort of innovative looking down. Certainly with my work in the club side, in the national team, I do have to be more on the field. But no, really interesting.
Not to dive into any specific players or organisations, of course, but how far away are we from players getting a real handle on the data that is collected on them and how it's potentially used and how it could impact their careers? And how mindful do we, as in sports scientists, S&C coaches, how mindful do we need to be that could potentially be becoming, because they are getting educated on what this is potentially used for, team selection, recruitment, all this kind of thing. Surely it can't be too long before they go, players asking questions. Where's that going? Who's seeing that? What influence is it having? And then maybe going, I don't want to wear that sleep tracker that you've got me on to see how much, because that's influencing X, Y, or Z. I know it's a delicate conversation. I 100% get that, but it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on how that might play out.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Again, really interesting. Great question, Robin. The whole GDPR. That I really wonder whether all clubs are really aware of what's going on with the data. The Swedish FA, we've just invested in SAP, which is a big database system, and we're very, very careful about who's seeing what data, what needs to be encrypted, what doesn't need to be encrypted, medical records, etc. And I just wonder whether they're like a lot of things, you think back to Balsom, it was one person who sort of broke to me. It's a really interesting. And I think of scouts, or agents. Why don't you as an agent, get all this data about your player to show your player, his best life. Some of the things that some of the analytics guys, and you look at Liverpool, you look even Leicester, you look at City. I mean, you're weighing every pass, you're weighing now position off the ball. Every time there's a possibility as a defender, are you in that right position to prevent stood in a passing channel? So, and that's just growing. We're just it's growing exponentially. Yeah, it's again a really good question. And of course, the question then is, if you're using data to show how good you are, then what happens then? Suddenly, that data's showing you're probably not as good. So, and when not directly, I'm not directly answering your question, but when does this data collection start? Mm-hmm. Does it start at 8? Does it start at 12? Does it start at 16? I mean, there are academies now collecting data way, way down for sort of this long-term player development. And if you think what was the average signing of a Premier League player? Is it £20 million? The average signing of £20 million. Wow. So yeah, and I mean, so you think that, and that's the average. Mm. And so you think long-term player development and sort of bringing players up through your academy. If data can help you and support you, but it's such a good question, Robin. Maybe that's another podcast for you to bring on someone who actually knows more about that, because it's a good question.
Mm-hmm. Just to finish off the last 5 or 10 minutes, and around support staff and how someone like yourself in the position that you hold at various clubs, how you can support your staff in the best way possible. And the reason I say that is because it comes off the conversation around this 24-hour athlete, but we've also got 24-hour support staff. I mean, I spoke to someone recently on the schedules that they have as a club, whether it be one game a week or 2 games a week. And this member of support staff was 80 hours in the building on a 1 game a week, and that was a home game. So you've got this incredible demand. And one question that I asked when I saw the data that I mentioned right at the start with the survey, we've got this young, or relatively young, under 35 age of the typical sports scientist S&C coach. Yes, it is because we're probably a young industry, but are people getting to that age and going, I can't do this anymore. This is just the work and the hours and the expectation is just brutal. I've got a wife and kids now, 30, 35. How can clubs and organisations and people in your position and like yourself do better to help those support staff and put things in place to enable them to not only get to 35, but get to 40, 45, 50 and still be in these kind of positions?
You're probably asking the wrong person. Wow. I mean, look, I've been supported by my family. I've got 4 boys, and wow. The times I've been away from home, and I do try, and it's not about myself, but I do try to balance it when I am home. But every organisation I worked in, who were the first people in the building? Sports scientists, performance analysts. Who were the last people out of the building? Sports science, performance analysts. I'm working with some young people here now at Leuven, and both have just had young children, and even last night I was last out of the building, but they were going home at 7, 8 o'clock, and it's difficult. It's again a really good question, and someone like the FMPA, I guess, an organisation like that, but I guess it's because we love our jobs and we're so passionate. So we, no one's like, putting handcuffs on us and handcuffing us to the door. And, a lot of the time we won't be there, doing things we have to do. So it's not like we have to log data from today. So it will be, I wonder if, let's take a little look at that. Or, hey, what if a research paper came in, hey, I saw him do something there today. Can we just go and look? And, I'm terrible. My time at Bolton, I think I got called as nutty as a fruitcake because, I used to come in and, they used to know that, midnight would be the earliest we would get home, but we loved it. It was because, and I think that's the difference. And again, it doesn't really answer your question, but it's kind of, we love our jobs and we're not trying to impress anyone. We just love what we do. But you're so right. And that balance, I've worked with one manager in particular who was very, very strict. And when the players were off, the staff were off, he was very, this is a day off and you are not to come into the training ground. I guess now with everything happening, there is an ability to work from home and, we couldn't do that, back in the day. But the last, I guess I could go home and jump on a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting with any of my colleagues if there was just like something we wanted to discuss. So there is that ability with technology to take us home. But it's really we should be practicing what we preach. What we say to our players: recovery, not physically but also mentally. You need to, and what do we do?
How did you deal with that, Paul? When the manager put them stipulations on you to have a day off? I guess when you're in this cycle of daily in work to have it's like, ooh, I'm feeling a bit anxious of should I be doing something?
But it was different for me. It was different because it was one during my time in the UK. Okay. So actually, I could still go into the training ground, but basically the other practitioners weren't there. So I got that was my excuse at least.
Got out of the day off.
But it's not good. It's not good to have abstinence from. I really do encourage people, and when I talk with practitioners, even managers now, I like to know what they do in the down period, and really like to encourage if it's if it's a hobby, if it's to be outside, if it's to spend time with a family. It's such an important balance. So again, a really good point that. We probably need to be we do need to be better at it.
Mm-hmm. One last thing I want to ask you, and it was something that you brought up in the email conversation that we had beforehand, and this is providing opportunities for ex-players to become fitness coaches. I suppose very, very loosely, bear with me here, I only played for a couple of years, but there was an opportunity for me to go to Manchester Met through the PFA sports science degree, and that was funded thankfully through the PFA, who were very, very helpful. But what other opportunities could we give ex-players, and why should we? Because there'll be the non-ex-players going, well, these get an easy ride. They get a potential quick pass through coaching qualifications. Why should we be helping them become fitness coaches? What opportunities should we be giving them?
I think again it's this balance between your ability to your knowledge of sports science, but your knowledge of football, and the sports scientists will be very biased towards their knowledge of sports science with very little experience of football, which of course with time they can learn. But you get an ex-player who will their knowledge will be of football, and they'll then have to learn sports science. But if we bring them together, and again it's this, we haven't had time to talk about it, but what is my role? If I'm a fitness coach, my emphasis could be on delivery, it could be working close to the head coach, it could be, and then I could be working with a sports scientist and another strength and conditioning coach, so I could be almost delivering. So just because my title is a fitness coach, I may not have to do everything. I still think some form of computer literacy and that, but and especially some of these, you imagine some of the players who have had to retire early through injury, and to maybe become a return to play, again another title, return to play coach, or what the rehab coach, or so again, with the right person, with the right attitude, and I think there should be some, I think it should be again a non-negotiable that they should do some form of online learning, or some form, like yourself, a sort of a 2-1, anything from a 1 to 5 year basic course to understand the basics of, physiology. We haven't talked about physiology, but how the body is working, and some very basic things. And of course, it has to be the right person. It has to be, we just can't be, oh, he's a player, let's bring him into a fitness coach. So again, this may be something that UEFA can sort of find different pathways, but we're quite, we're all agreed that, we should at least consider this option because of this real solid knowledge of the game.
I'm really pleased. Sorry to interrupt, Paul. I'm really pleased you said that, because I think as sports scientists who've not come through that pathway as an ex-player do look down a little bit on that knowledge of football. Like, oh, that's all right, but we need the technical knowledge, and I get that, but having the knowledge of the game and, like you say, going back to the C word, the culture, and understanding how to speak to managers, just what goes on in a football club, like that can take a long time for someone who's not been in a football club. So that person, an ex-player, has that head start, and the knowledge and the learning of the sports science could happen alongside that. Yes, really interesting
exactly.
point.
Alongside, so it's building a partnership. So it's not just it's the two of you together. So one will have more experience in one area, one will have more experience in the other. But and again, this is where technology and data can help, because you've done a session. Just imagine, then the player, comes in and the scientist says, okay, look, this is what we've done today. This is the intensity, this is the volume, this is the internal response. Then we did this, and look what happened. So there could be this constant, for a player who really wants to learn and is passionate enough to learn. And I think there's huge opportunities.
Cool. I know you mentioned you're not big on social media, but they do know you have it. So if anyone's got any questions or wants to follow up with anything this conversation related or anything else, is there a good place for people to contact you, Paul?
Probably LinkedIn. Probably LinkedIn is probably that's the one now that I've been a little bit more active. One of my sons is in doing strategical communication, and he's on to me all the time. Dad, you need to. Probably LinkedIn, yeah, LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place to find me. There are actually, believe it or not, there are two Paul Balsams. There's so I call myself Paul D. Balsom. There's another Paul Balsam who was working in Bath Rugby and now gone across to Canada. So you just need to make sure, if anybody does have a question, it's you find out the right. Just one thing before we finish is that I'm also very interested in working with UEFA is the women's game. We didn't get a chance to mention that, and I think there's some huge prospects in the women's game, and we are really doing all we can at UEFA to support them, and there's some great players coming through there, and this is a game that's we've seen it increase over the years, and it will continue to increase. So I'm also quite passionate about the support we can offer them as well.
Superb. Thanks for mentioning that, because we didn't quite get there, but thank
you
very much.
Was it International Women's Day yesterday? Was it?
It was. It was. Absolutely was. Absolutely was. But no, Paul, thank you very much for giving up your time. Really appreciate it. Stick around. We'll have a little chat after, but officially, I will let you go. So appreciate it. Thanks, mate.
Super. Thanks, Rob. Take care.
Bye bye.